And then after that,
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I have created as much of a safe space for myself here as I can. I've been coughing all week.
so you sound not feeling well.
Yeah, I'm not feeling really well. But, so we will need interludes for cough drops and coughing and stuff. Hopefully you all got the documents that I sent you. Does anyone have any questions about the agenda? Okay, all those in favor of approving the agenda, please raise your hand. Opposed, same sign. Okay. The February 21st meeting minutes. Anybody have any questions about those? All right, hearing none, if you're okay with approval of the minutes as presented, please raise your hand. Opposed, same sign. Okay, the minutes are approved. I did send you a little synopsis of the agenda items. I did lie to you about the insurance update after I'd already sent this. I didn't know Lori was coming. So I would like to amend the order of the agenda, and we'll have Lori give us an update now. It's all yours.
I'm pretty sure you saw all the bars and graphs and charts and numbers and said, maybe you should come. That's okay. Thank you for letting me come and talk through this. It's been quite a process. We've really done a lot of hard work to bring you, the district, the best options available in the marketplace. As you know, as we talked the last time I was here, we have looked at plan design changes, but the precursor to deciding what those plan design changes are going to look like falls into the marketing. What is the best deal that we can get from our providers, or what other providers are out there to bring us good deals? And so I kind of have a little summary, a recap of where we were before. And keep in mind, this is really just to remind us where we were and give you a visual way to put all this into perspective, because it's a lot of numbers that we're talking about, and we really want to try to understand why we're playing with all these numbers. When we talked before, because we're self-funded, it's our job as the district to be the fiduciary of the plan and to make sure that we are collecting enough premium to pay the claims that are coming in as we utilize the plan. We want to make sure that everyone has the coverage available when it's time to use it, and by funding the plan appropriately, that's how we do that. We also talked about the last time that on the path that we are in now, because our claims are creeping up, more employees and dependents are utilizing the plan, and that's what it's there for. We now need to solve for that. We've been able to recognize multiple years of keeping everything the same by making the changes on the funding mechanisms on the backside. And now it's time for us to take those steps to solve for the higher claims that are coming in. We're taking proactive measures, increasing wellness, well-being all the way around, negotiating the cost of services, and that's part of what the marketing process did. But ultimately, this is kind of where we were. Our forecast a few months ago said that if we left everything the same, we were going to have to dip into reserve somewhere around $500,000 this coming year to keep the plan exactly the way it was. So the last time we were here, we talked about one of the ways to do that would be to make some plan design changes. Maybe incentive to participate in the HSA, the district giving you dollars to put into the HSA to fund that part of that deductible. If you wanted to keep the HMO, it would cost a little bit out of your pocket each month to help pay those premiums for the cost of services. So during our marketing process, we had, as you can see on the label, Kansas City Blue Cross and United Healthcare, or UMR, came back as the finalists and presented us with some excellent options this week. The categories at the top are what we judged their proposals on. We took into account their references, the communications, how they handle account management and client reporting, how they handle claims, their customer service. And we took into account the financial aspect, the true dollars and cents of, thank you very much, the true dollars and cents of what the plan cost and what it would cost with each one of the different providers. As you can see, the green is indicated a savings, a reduction in cost. And all across the board, everybody that came to the table brought us an offer of savings. So even if we did absolutely nothing, we stayed with Kansas City Blue Cross, with our Express Scripts through Kansas City Blue Cross, we have savings on the table. It is the least amount of savings, as you can see on the spreadsheet, of any of the other options. But it's zero disruption, everything stays exactly the same, and we have some savings. What that means then is whenever we go to plan design changes, we would have to make up a little bit more in plan design changes. Meaning, we talked about 2 or 3 different options when we were here the last time. A basic plan design change, a little bit more aggressive, and then an extreme plan design change. We were leaning towards the basic plan design change, leaving an HMO, a PPO, and an HSA, just a little bit higher deductible, a little bit more of copay on the employee's part, and leaving the plans basically the same. So if we do absolutely nothing, there's still room for that. There's just not very much room for the district to put money into the HSA. So that's an option on the table. That was one of the considerations that the committee was looking at. The most savings came in with a change of a network, change of provider, going to UMR, and basically changing everything. But that was a lot of money whenever we looked at the bottom line. And so, being good stewards of the public's funds, we have to look at that. That's part of our job, is to say, okay, where's that value? Where do we put that as far as what's important to us? Is it really, let's get the best deal, the cheapest all the way across, or is there some happy medium where we take into account value? No disruption, no change, and yet being able to have some dollars flexible to put that in your hands as employees, so that you get to make the choice. Do I want to have that money in my HSA, or do I want to continue to have the HMO and have that low out of pocket whenever I go to the doctor? So there is a kind of a middle of the road on this diagram, and that would be Blue Cross and Blue Shield, the network, and then a direct contract with Express Scripts. Express Scripts is your pharmacy provider, and one of the finalists came in with the St. Louis Business Health Coalition as a direct contract through ESI. Now, that's a lot of acronyms, that's a lot of confusion, and the way that I explained it was, right now, we have one umbrella. We have one bundle. It's Kansas City Blue Cross, and they handle everything. When we were talking about going self-funded, and we were talking about the different options of doing that, we had the option to stay in one bundle with Kansas City Blue Cross, or we had the option to unbundle and get our medical network here, our pharmacy network here, and our claims paying network here. So from the middle to the right are basically those unbundled options. You still have the same types of services, it's just delivered in 3 separate contracts instead of one group contract that we have now. The absolute cheapest, most savings is to go with United Healthcare, UMR. UMR is the claims paying arm of that. And recognize the largest savings there with the pharmacy benefit as St. Louis Business Health Coalition. So that's Express Scripts, that's UMR or United Healthcare UMR Network, and the Express Scripts Pharmacy is the biggest savings on the spreadsheet. What they presented to us earlier this week was that there were very little disruption with providers and very little difference in the cost of services, about 6-7%. So if you chose the HSA and you went to your doctor and that copay was $100, when at the UHC network you would pay $107 instead of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield network paying $100 on that HSA. You accumulate to your deductible faster, so it's $7 on every 100. Again, it's a lot of confusion, but what that means is it's relatively close when it comes to the amount of disruption or the amount of cost difference. So we've illustrated it this way so that you can see if you do nothing, we've covered the negative in the projections that we talked about a few months ago. We've covered the negative, and that's basically all we've done. You keep your same network, you keep everything the same, but then we're probably going to have this conversation again next year. If we choose to take advantage of some of the savings programs, or we go with the Blue Cross and Blue Shield network with ESI as the direct contract for the pharmacy, again with our 3 different bundles, then that gives us the next step into a little bit more savings. If we go all the way to United Healthcare, that's the most dollars on the bottom of the sheet, but it's different.
But does it still allow for HMO, PPO, and the HSA?
The plan design looks the same. The network with United Healthcare, they don't offer an HMO strictly, so you're not restricted to an HMO network. You have access to the whole United Healthcare network, but the plan design would look similar. We get to design that because the district, we own the plan now, we're self-funded, so we would design that to look similar. If that was the option when we get to the plan design to, yes, let's leave the plan designs as close as we can leave them, then yes, it would be very similar. Where right now, if you're on the HMO with Kansas City Blue Cross and you have a child that's out of network, you have to get that extra add-on. If you're on the HSA or the PPO, you have the Blue Card network and there's no add-on required. With UMR and UHC, there's no add-on. You have that child. It's not one more step to get the child even on that HMO designed plan. It's basically the same. The other proposal that was brought to the table by Kansas City Blue Cross was the Select Network. So currently, everybody that utilizes the Blue Cross and Blue Shield network was evaluated to say, okay, how many of these claims or how many of these individual subscribers could have used the Select network and still not had any difference in their care. They would have had the same providers, the same services, everything. And there was a big number, like 30 or 40% of the employees that utilized the HMO, or the one on the HMO, that could have been in the Select network. That is another way that we could save an additional like 12%. It was a pretty big number that we could save by adding that as an option. What that means is they give you a bigger discount for using doctors or providers in that smaller network. And what they did with the evaluation said that for about 30% of the population, they could use that and wouldn't notice any difference at all. The rest of the population wouldn't elect that option and would stay with where they were. So they brought some other solutions to the table where they knew that maybe they weren't there cost-wise on the bottom line, but offering some other solutions that might be strategic or might have some other options. The other thing that they did bring that was in part of the consideration was, you see the big number down there on PBM. Pharmacy contracts include a rebate in part of their contract. Whenever you go and you get a specialty medication or a name brand drug, a lot of the pharmacists, like Pfizer and Merck and the big pharma, they provide a rebate whenever the doctors are prescribe their expensive medication. So you pay your brand name copay, and then on the back side, there's rebates that come in for those prescriptions that are made. If we stay with Kansas City Blue Cross, the way that they provide those rebates is in a credit. They give us a credit for every script that is written whenever, or every member, we get a credit for the pharmacy piece. What they're willing to do is pay that credit up front as a cash infusion to the plan every year as we move forward. The other plans pay more of the rebates, but it takes longer to come in. So when we see those dollar amounts are significantly different there. With any of the other plans where we're actually collecting the rebates instead of the credit, we collect them a little bit later, but we get more money. And I say it comes into the medical plan and it offsets claim costs, and it goes into that health benefit plan trust. It's not like the district gets the money. it goes back into the health benefit plan. And those funds, as we talked about before, are restricted to the utilization for the health plan. So we could put money into the HSA, we could, if that account gets large enough and the district chooses that option, they could purchase dental, vision, things like that that we've talked about in the past. That may be down the road a little further, but it puts that money back into the health benefit plan to utilize for those types of expenses. Each one of the bidders provided wellness dollars for us to use to enhance the wellness program. Each one of them provided additional dollars for analyzing the claims and different things like that. So there were lots of extras that all of them provided during this marketing process. It was a very difficult evaluation, knowing that anything different, any kind of change is, makes some people uneasy. And we need to keep that in mind. But when there's, significant dollars on the table, it's something that we have to take into consideration, being good stewards of the public funds. Any questions on this slide before we move on a little bit? I'll add in at this point too, part of the other things that are going on or other things that we're looking at during this process and don't necessarily play into this are bringing in a retiree group plan option for supplemental and for Medicare Advantage. So retirees would have a couple of different options to choose from there as well. And then, what was my hair? Draw a blank. I'll click on down through here. Oops. Okay. The bottom of the sheet here, we kind of talked about stepping into where we eventually need to go. The last time I was here, we talked about those three different options: the basic step, the a little bit more aggressive, and then the extreme option. And this contribution strategy is kind of where we're thinking that we might have to go as we move forward. And this kind of lays out the path or the steps to get there. Nothing set in stone, but just an idea that because the HMO cost the medical plan the most, by allocating those premium dollars and making that plan actually cost the most on the premium, that will help to right side it. But the more that we continue to use that and the costs continue to go up, it looks like that eventually that HMO will probably have to go away. And these are kind of some steps to get there, so that it's not shock and awe where we have to go to a $5,000 deductible all of a sudden because we didn't make these changes as we're moving along.
Kelly, do you have a question? No.
It's a lot.
It's overwhelming.
It's a lot. It really is a lot. And that's why I think that by having a couple of different options, we don't necessarily have to go to the extremes right off the bat. But you see the weight of what the committee and the administration are dealing with whenever they're trying to make these decisions. I heard throughout the whole process, we need to take care of our employees. We need to make sure that our employees have that peace of mind, that they have a solid plan that they can use. We appreciate our employees and we want to make that consistent. But we also have to be good stewards of the public funds, and we have to make sure that we're managing the plan and we're being solvent so that we can continue to put more money in paychecks or buy additional programs or things like that, that we have to take all of that into consideration.
Any questions for Lori?
Okay.
Is that it?
I can make more if you want, but no, I'm just kidding. Yes, I think
It's-
that's it.
Without looking at this ahead of time, I can't come up
Sure,
with
no
questions
problem.
just off the fly.
And really, this is kind of bringing this to you to show you how much they were dealing with whenever they're kind of leaning that way. But I think leaning probably towards saving money is the way that the committee was leaning. So I think that, give it some time, process it, and then reach out to your administration and let them know how you feel.
And on the timeline that you had, when was the recommendation for where the committee what the committee has decided go? Like, when does that recommendation come?
I think from 5:30 on, I think is the point for that. There wasn't an official, you have until this point to give feedback, but the board will be deciding or voting on that at the board meeting at the end of the month.
At the end of the month.
Uh-huh.
Because you have open enrollment starting next.
Yeah.
So in theory, what your proposal is changing companies, but leaving it basically the same, sorta.
So-
Without the
For the
HMO.
employees, you mean, right?
For us, what's the
What we
bottom
see.
line for us?
What we see.
So the thing that you would want to think about is how big of a disruption is it going to be for your ID card to look different?
I don't care about that
Okay. Then,
personally.
yes. So plan design is going to come in the next step. Whenever we see how many dollars we have to work with, then we'll be able to make a more solid recommendation on plan design. We're still leaning towards the same that we were talking about before with the HMO type, the PPO type, and the HSA type. The more dollars that are available for the plan to utilize, the more dollars that we have to work with as far as putting more money in the HSA, keeping premiums the same or similar, that kind of thing.
So the only thing that's going to the board is whether or not we're changing companies or not, or the whole thing?
What's going to the board is well, it would be the whole thing.
Okay.
Yeah, we would, but having an idea of where we're going to go would then, we'd know how much. Because like I said early on, if we do absolutely nothing, we have enough dollars on the table to keep the plans similar with those recommended changes that we did to the plan design early on, which were very minor. But that means then we come back next year and we have to have this conversation again and we have to talk boring insurance all over again.
But this would be a 3-year contract. Is that what that said?
The 3-year contract with the providers, yes.
Okay.
But like what I'm saying is if we choose, let's say.
To stay the same.
Stay the same. We keep Kansas City Blue Cross, we keep the all-in-one umbrella. That means more dollars have to be pulled out of the plan design changes. If we do the minimum this year, we'll have to do another one next year and probably another one next year. If we take one of those middle-of-the-road options, then we can make the same plan design changes, but then have more money to leave it the same longer.
Does anybody have any angst from moving from Blue Cross Blue Shield to the United Healthcare? Does anybody have major heartburn about that?
As long as there are people here in town that I can go to.
Right, your same doctors, right?
I mean, that is,
They took a look at the disruption, and really every doctor was on there. There was like one chiropractor that wasn't on there. But they
Hope
can,
it's not
they can
Zimmerman.
reach out,
Yes.
they can reach out to that person to be able to say, hey, for whatever reason, you're not on our network plan, would you be willing to be a part of it? Or you can even ask your person
Yeah.
if they're not a part of it, hey, I'd really love for you to be a part of it, would you fill out the form? And sometimes that twists a provider's arm a little bit if their patient's asking that question. But really, it was like, I want to say it was 0.6, so 99.4% of people would not have any
It wouldn't even
medical
be that
disruption
small.
or any problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That you could possibly get them in network anyway.
what
But
was
didn't
your-
you
We
say-
had UMR, my previous employer, and we had that very situation where we would ask others to take our insurance and we would do it, so.
What was your?
I guess my only question, I've had a terrible time finding doctors in St. Joe that will take new patients. And I guess maybe my question is, these doctors that are in the network, will they accept new patients?
From what they
If
showed
not-
us on the disruption report, you wouldn't have to switch doctors. You would just give them a different ID card.
As long as your
Still go to
doctor's
your
not in that
doctor.
whatever.
Right,
Yeah.
I guess that
So
was my
before.
concern. If my doctor's in that small point that isn't,
And if
can I
that's,
get in?
and if that's a decision that's made, then what that company brings in, United Healthcare brings in those transition people to help you find it. You can't, if your doctor's not in, then they will help you find a doctor that's accepting new patients.
I was gonna say, I had United Healthcare with the state, and, I mean, I didn't have any problem with finding a provider. My only problem was, and this has been 10 years ago now, is I would venture to say I have not really had a whole lot of problems with working with Blue Cross and Blue Shield on situations, and I
Right.
did with United.
So that's a little bit of a difference there because Kansas City Blue Cross is local, they're invested, they are part of the community, and they have that ability to call the doctor at Mosaic and have a little bit more arm twisting maybe than United Healthcare is one of the largest in the country, and so they have access everywhere, but maybe they don't have that local touch as much, where their pressure comes from the provider contracts or a higher up kind of a place rather than being in the neighborhood and knowing who to call and who to get an exception from. So
The only thing I'd say about that is Mosaic is who gets most of our work anyhow, and neither Blue Cross nor UMR holds really any sway over Mosaic.
Right.
Mosaic does because they're their own entity, does that
Right.
make sense?
Right.
So what really has to happen is how do we work with our partnership as a school district with Mosaic? That's why you've seen some surveys about after-school hours and telemed and
Right.
some of those other things. That happens whether it's with Blue Cross or whether it's with UMR.
Lori, wasn't there, I think of this as an advantage with United Healthcare where you can go anywhere with your United Healthcare card, even if you're out of state or your children are out of state, you know, they're on your insurance till 26 these days.
yeah, she mentioned that earlier about the student at college, because they don't have an HMO, a restricted network on that HMO, you can go anywhere in the United Healthcare network. Now with Blue Cross and Blue Shield, you use their Blue Card network, and if you're on the PPO with the HSA, you have that same ability. But on the HMO, you do add that extra add-on for the child at college. So it
So
is a
you're,
difference.
if you're on vacation and stuff and something happens too, that's kind of a handy.
Yeah.
In this, since we've gone through it, like the slides themselves fairly quickly, is there a breakdown of or is this something that the district has to develop because we are self-funded, of the breakdown of the actual co-pays that each one of these options would provide because of the different providers?
Yes,
or is it
that's
it's
what we
not
developed.
Yet?
That's what we develop after we know how many
After
dollars we
those.
have to work with.
Okay.
But you have that peace of mind to know that even if we do nothing, the projections of what we had shown before of making small changes, for instance, $200 to the emergency room instead of $150, $35 for a brand name drug instead of $25. Little things like that would be all the plan changes that would be necessary by having these significant savings on the backside.
Okay.
That's for all of the plans, none of them would be dramatically different, is
Right.
what you're saying.
Right,
Because even with the one where you do nothing and get the least amount of savings, it's only that much.
right.
But is there a possibility to go with the most amount of savings where there isn't a change to the copays?
Hopefully.
I would tell you, not personally, no offense to Kathy.
Oh, you don't think so?
What you have to really take a look at is right now, all of your plans get added together and divided by 3. And so every plan pays the same, when that's not how it really works. HMOs are a more expensive plan. So if you're on a different plan under an HMO, you are funding the HMO plan. So I think there would have to be some way to right-size that, and that's what I think Lori was saying earlier, is that the HSA plan costs $100, the HMO plan costs $140.
But with
So-
the most savings, there isn't an HMO anymore, right? Isn't that what I understood?
When we talk about most savings, switching networks and switching all that stuff, we would leave the plans the same. We wouldn't have
But I
to,
thought you said there wouldn't be a
It's not,
HMO.
they don't have what's called an HMO, the plan design
Yeah.
can stay the same
So-
within their network, they just don't call it an HMO.
right. We just changed the label from HMO to and we can still call it HMO if you want, but on your HMO, you have to use a doctor that's in the network, or it's out of network benefits. So if you switch to United Healthcare, on that plan design, where you still have your copay and you only have a maximum of $2,700, you can still go to any doctor in the PPO network.
And then also with the savings, we talked about at our committee meeting that that's how we would bump up the HSAs, our contribution as a district, in order to help people kind of migrate, those that can migrate to that, because it's a lot cheaper cost-wise to be able to have those HSAs. But we talked about upfronting some of that and hopefully increasing that so that would look better.
If the district were to contribute to HSAs, would it be a one-time contribution or would it be an annual contribution?
Monthly.
Well, what I mean is
Normally,
every
every
year,
year.
if you were in the HSA for 5 years, 5 years worth, you'd have a contribution every month from the
Yeah.
district. Correct.
It kind of like what we talked about before, the issue now is there's no real incentive to go to an HSA because you're out of pocket more
Yeah.
with what's there.
Right.
We would be trying to take a look at, is there a way to balance that out? So your incentive, you're not out anything more as an employee to be in an HSA as compared to anything else.
Can I ask, would the contribution be higher for those, let's just say the more mature ones, that would there be a higher contribution for those of us who are a little bit more mature in age,
In an HSA?
Yes.
Not normally.
Okay.
Because what happens, and it's all about education, and if that's the way it goes, it'd have to be a big education process. Because really what happens is you pay more first dollar up front,
Right.
and so you still are the consumer. You decide, like for example, my daughter needed an MRI. You're going to take a look at what places offer an MRI in town. Well, this one charges $200 and this one charges $1,000. Well, where are you going to go? If it's now you're paying the first dollar toward it, you're probably going to spend 5 minutes to find out where you need to go and then choose the one that's $200. Where right now there is no incentive to do that on those other plans, but that's why those other plans cost more. That makes sense, what I'm saying?
Something you do get to take advantage of as a more mature contributor. The IRS allows you a catch-up privilege on the HSA. While you're still an active participant in the plan, you get to contribute a little bit more yourself if you choose to do so. The district has to contribute the same amount for everybody. They can't discriminate, but you get to, as an individual, you can pull money out of your paycheck or deposit outside of this district, and you have an extra catch-up that's allowed by the IRS.
And that's a tax benefit to you also.
It is. And I can say with Candace, my daughter, her working in Kansas City in private industry, she has an HSA. I knew nothing about them before. She loves it. The company contributes X amount of dollars. She can contribute up to, or I think a little bit more than what they do. And if you have to use it, you use it. But if you meet your deductible, everything else is paid for the rest of the year. But if you don't use it, it becomes another savings account. So this can carry you through the rest of your life.
And you don't have to do that. You can still do the other kind of plans if that's not something that's important.
Well, and everybody, and I think that's to the educational piece, everybody is going to be a little bit different, and if you have a certain issue, you might have to stay on the HMO, just because of, your situation. But I think that's where the education is so key and so important, is that you all start making those decisions for what's best for you and your family.
Ultimately, when you look at this, you're better off having the options that we have rather than saying you have a 15% increase and you're having to make some major plan changes. This allows you to proactively and step by step make some of the adjustments that Lori was talking about, which in the long run stabilizes the expense to the employee and stabilizes the expense to the district, which I think everybody would rather have in this process.
And Lori, can you talk to them just a little bit about the St. Louis organization with the pharmacies and how every year that they do that audit and basically kind of what that entails?
Yes. So when we talked about the unbundle or the separate silos for pharmacy, medical, and claims paying. When we talk about the pharmacy silo, your medications right now are coming from Express Scripts through Kansas City Blue Cross. What they're looking at as far as an option would be to stay with Express Scripts, but it's a direct contract with a group out of St. Louis called the St. Louis Business Health Coalition. By being a part of that and buying with that contract, you also get added benefits that go along with that contract. Some of those added benefits include an annual claims audit of your pharmacy benefit claims. So when they say you're going to get $1.2 million in rebates, this audit goes back and makes sure that every single one of those prescriptions collected the rebate that they had promised, and we got all the money. It also makes sure that there's some checks and balances in place so that they make sure that you're not being prescribed the most expensive medication on the formulary without going through the steps to get there. And that if there is an alternative, that they make you alert as the patient and the plan alert that there are other alternatives out there that you can choose from. So you get to make that decision, again, with your doctor to make sure that what you're taking is the most cost-effective for you and the plan and the most medically appropriate. So they just add some extra benefits onto that. Some of those things are provided under the current contract, and it's just handled in a different way. With them being completely independent, that's part of their membership fee to be involved with that group, and that's what they bring to the table. There's additional savings programs where they're going to show you, much like what you have now with Kansas City Blue, show you where the cheapest medication is for what you've been prescribed, where it is the cheapest to buy it, whether it's Walgreens or CVS or Walmart, whatever. Those things are available as well.
And they also keep track also is if say you're diabetic and if there are certain things that you're supposed to be doing, certain checkups, if those people haven't done those checkups, that there's some contact.
Right.
Some direct contact with them as well. But also their program is, they've got it to where you're in the doctor's office, and when the doctor's going to prescribe you something, all of these different prices are going to come up because, quite frankly, how many doctors really know how much medicine costs? So you're there and on their screen when they're going to write out that script or electronically send it to somebody, they can go through those options with you so that you know this is the best place to get that medicine. Or if this generic is just as good as this name brand, then hopefully they can help you make better choices as well.
Do they have a directive to do that, or is that they can do that?
Well, I think that it's a new thing, so I think that there was an increase of people doing that, but it's not where I think that everybody wants it to be, but I think that it'll get there.
The way I understood it, it's tied to the electronic medical record. So when your physician logs in and goes through the electronic medical record portal, that's when that thing pops up for them. If they're not utilizing that, if they're just using an old script pad and not logging in and going through the electronic medical records, they may have to be one more step that the doctor does. But you can ask them to do that.
But they have an app for that too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Where
So
you can actually punch it in yourself.
what determines how much is put into your HSA account?
The district.
I mean, like, for example, my husband's employer, we're on the family insurance. Our deductible is $5,000, but his employer only contributes $600.
So the IRS has a limit that an employer can contribute, an annual limit. And so they can't, that's the max that an employer can put into your account. And then we lay out the financials as far as how much premium we're collecting in, how many claims we're expecting to pay out, and then how many dollars we have left over in reserve. And so those reserve dollars are where they would decide, okay, we're going to have this many extra dollars left in reserve, let's fund that back to the HSA for the employee up to the IRS maximum amount, or somewhere in between. So that employer has laid out their financials, and they have determined that by the premium they're collecting in, they can allot back $600 for those employees. Where we had talked about doing $125 a month based on the financials we were looking at that point. If we have more dollars, then we can potentially look at more contribution to the HSA.
And that's on a what deductible or out-of-pocket max or whatever?
I think the plan design that we were looking at was $4,700 maximum out of pocket.
Okay, so it's about a quarter
Yeah, and like I said, those
1,200
numbers were
whatever.
just what
I
we were
know,
looking
but
at for that moment.
That helps me understand, so no matter what, you'd always be paying way more out of pocket to reach the maximum until the entire plan would cover everything that you had.
Potentially, yes. That's why when Lori was talking about you take your personal situation, if you know you have this many expenses throughout the year, then we lay that out on the paper and you decide, okay, I'm only going to pay this much premium and the district is going to give me this much of that to cover, and here's my expenses. So here's my bottom line. If I pay extra for the HMO, but I only have this much out of pocket, here's my bottom line. And then you compare what works best for you.
Kind of depends if you're a gambling man or not.
Kind of, yes.
Yeah.
Does that also mean then that the
I'm not.
HSA, that the HSA contribution could potentially be lower than the $125 that you were speaking about? Like if the savings was not there to give $125 a month, could it drop down to $75 a month?
Technically, yes, but we were solving for, in our projections, we were solving for the 125 or more. So technically, yes, everybody had a catastrophic claim, and we're looking at,
Stay healthy, people, stay healthy.
In the gamble with that, Eric, really just depends. Like, for example, I've been on an HSA the last 13 years until I came here. And then when my daughter had surgery, yes, I paid a little bit more up front, but she had her surgery in February, and then from February on, since I met all my deductibles, everything was paid for. There wasn't anything else that anybody else in my family had to do because of her knee surgery. So that's the gamble. In some years, you may have to pay a little bit more, but as soon as you pay it, you're done. Otherwise, you get well, if it's $125, that's $1,500 every year to move forward that you don't use it. That makes, so that's the gamble that people have to
If
look at.
if you're an employee for, we'll say 4 or 5 years, then you may end up with enough in your HSA to cover your entire year's deductible if a catastrophic event were to happen. But I mean, just my point of view on that, if we're talking about employees that, their paycheck in a month is less than that entire deductible, I mean, and all the bills, I mean, it's just a big,
Yeah.
there's
There's a balance.
there's a very big balancing act. So, yeah.
Especially
And you have to remember through an HSA, you can use those dollars for any medical thing that you need to do. It's not just health related, it can be dental, it can be vision, it can be hearing, it can be buying Tylenol, that you need to, so it really depends on the flexibility that person needs or wants within it. It's not for everybody, but neither is every other plan that we have. There's some plans that just aren't right for everybody.
And that's why it comes down to personal, what you as a family or you as an individual need. And that's why I think this has the flexibility to cover everybody.
that's what I just don't want to get to, is that that's the only option as an HSA, because when you have both spouses working for the district, there isn't another option. Like Amy can go to her husband's other employer's option, which isn't, necessarily the best. You know what I mean? But
Yes.
like if it was maybe a better one, she could go to that one.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like we don't have an option in the Bristol household, so
Right.
we have to go with a district insurance.
Just being brutally honest, most every business at some point is going to mostly HSAs. You talk to not that they're doing it all right now, but because that's what most companies are going toward, is the HSA style of some sort. Now, can there be different variations to it? A little bit, but most are. I'm not saying that we are, but I'm just telling you with the way that premiums and healthcare costs are, almost every company is looking at how do they stabilize their costs, and it's with a consumer-driven, high-deductible plan.
We're not at all advocating going to just that,
Yeah.
so be confident in that. But I think he is making the point that in the business world, that's where they're funneling everything to there. We're not advocating that at all.
We don't make business incomes.
Just one more clarification. So you said that technically the HSA contribution could decrease rather than, increase. Would that happen during the one contract period or?
Oh, no.
No, okay, I just wanted to.
So for the year, it would be.
Right. Yeah.
You always have the option to enroll in something else at the end of, you have an open enrollment period. The board, in my opinion, would always need to let you know what that contribution is going to be for the following year, so you can make that decision.
So the board would need to make that decision by February, March each year moving forward.
You have to make it at least by April, because I think
Well, open
it's not
enrollment
here,
isn't,
but
Early-
because
early
for the open enrollment component, so people would need to know.
because that's coming up really super quickly. But both of the companies were confident, well, if we would decide to go to the United Healthcare, they were confident that they would be able to get everything set up for the open enrollment, and that shouldn't be an issue.
With that, and since your plan doesn't start until July, that gives them plenty of time to actually implement the plan, get out ID cards, things like that, no matter who it is.
I mean, I think like Kelly, like with your kids being out of state, this would be just seamless if we did go to the United Healthcare, because it's just one network. So that might be easier for some people.
Oh, that'll be really easy, I mean, way easier for my two.
I think it's always, we've said this over and over again, change is always scary, and that's why I think that this whole group was ever started, was so that we could always have those open conversations so that you all would understand what we're looking at, so you're not surprised. The change is hard.
Dr. Kraus, can you send that to us, this presentation? Or
I'll
is
get a
this-
version that we can.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll forward it on to you. You may not be able to open it, but
Here, I'll print it for you, then we'll, we
yeah,
might get
then
3
you get to
pages.
see it
Do a
all.
little light reading tonight and fall asleep.
She is not very good at printing.
I'm challenged when it comes to
Oh,
printing.
that's fine.
Just as long as this page isn't 0.
That's right. Okay.
any other questions for Lori before we move on to our next topic?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Lori.
Thank you.
Now, Amy, I know you emailed me, and I said, I thought about an hour.
You lied to me.
That was before I knew Lori was going to be here. So she screwed up the whole timetable.
We'll hustle it up.
Now, Dr. Kraus, you guys take accountability here.
I really do.
Those are my famous words.
Okay, let's go to look at the calendar days. I put a bunch of individual employee group calendars in there. The only one that's any different from the current year is the 176 calendar. If you'll find out, I believe it's the 4th actual calendar.
The one that says pending board decision.
Excuse me.
This,
The one that says pending board decision is the 170. That would deal with the bus drivers. So that would depend on what we're doing in terms of busing, outsourcing, or keeping it.
Just like 176.
176, yeah, I believe it's the 4th one. And on my copy, I put some little yellow marks. We had quite a robust discussion about making August 8th and August 9th, the first 2 days for the paras, so they would be there for the first day of building meetings and then a work day. And in order not to increase the total length of their contract, since we added those 2 days, we had to remove 2 others. And the ones we talked about were August 14th, which is the second teacher work day, and that's got a little N in it, meaning not working. And the other one was January 6th, which is the PD/work day after the Christmas break. So they still end up with, excuse me, this is going to get old quickly. They still end up with 176 days just like they had. They're working 2 earlier and taking 2 off a little later. Does that look familiar to everybody? I believe that accurately reflects what we talked about. Any concerns on that one?
So, on the calendar, will that be spelled out so everybody understands?
Well,
Because some people like to create their own days off.
I cannot guarantee that everyone will understand. That's
that's one
beyond
thing you
my.
can guarantee.
I can
Everybody's
guarantee
not gonna
everybody will
understand.
not understand. Let me put it that way. We will try to make it as plain as we possibly can, but will there be confusion? Yeah.
Yeah, always.
Absolutely. But that's the only change to any of the calendars other than, the normal switching that happened by this year. The first day was the 9th and next year it's the 8th, that kind of stuff. So does I'm sorry, what?
It's a leap
Well,
year.
let's look on the,
2020
is
is.
there a 29? Yeah. 2020, February of 2020 is a leap year. So are there any questions about the individual employee group calendars from anybody?
Dr. Kraus, can we talk real quickly about the library facilitator's calendar?
Sure.
Um,
Are they,
Is library facilitator the elementary version
Yes.
only?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what.
It's a 179-day calendar.
which is what it's been.
Right.
So they won't be there for the
First day
staff meetings.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
I would like to recommend to the group that we kind of do the same thing for them on the 8th, and then they wouldn't work the 14th. I would also like to recommend that they work the 18th of October and not work on the 6th of January.
Okay. The 18th of October, isn't that the,
That is the parent-teacher conference Friday date, but that would mean they would work parent-teacher conferences the week in October.
they are working parent-teacher conferences, because if you'll notice, on the 17th it says 49, and on the 21st it says 51. So they are,
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're-
in essence, getting their 5 days. that
Okay,
week.
so I take that back, and I would go back to just recommending that their first day back is the 8th of August, and they're off the 14th. That way, does that
No,
put
that-
all employee groups at school on the 8th?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Dr. Norman, is there a way there could be another day? This is my only thought behind that. If you have a lot of new staff members in your building, they're trying to get their curriculum checked out to those teachers before school starts, like class sets of wonders or math expression, whatever it might be. So is there another day that doesn't fall before school where they could get that job done? I understand we have to find a day. I'm just wondering if the 14th is not the best.
So would you propose that they don't work on the 6th of January?
I'm open, I just am thinking before school when they're trying to push out, because like this year, our librarian had to check out all of my stuff, every new staff member, all of their curriculum had to be checked out and delivered to their room from the library.
I'll change my recommendation to be they work the 8th of August and they do not work the 6th of January.
I think that's.
I'm just devil's advocate, because I don't know. Would
What's the
they
devil have to do
want?
with this?
Would they want to not be there the first day back, the second semester? Would you have the same?
It's usually PD though, like, it's nothing, to me, it would not be as earth shattering for them to be gone then as it would.
I'm just saying, I know,
Like
like,
the staff meeting,
obviously,
not-
mine is a middle school librarian, so it's very different, but
Mhm.
I just know she does a lot of work on that day.
They do a lot of work every day.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, I mean, yeah,
It's,
yeah. I just, because it's a new semester, I'm just trying to make sure we're covering the start of school.
I can't speak for them, but I would, just from working with them, I think they would like to be at school before.
I know what
That's
their
more
libraries
important
look like in
than
August
January.
versus January.
Okay.
So any further discussion on the merits of working the 8th versus the 6th of January? Anybody else have an opinion?
8th is an intruder training day too, I think.
Well, yeah, I think it definitely makes sense to have them there the 8th, because we have every other employee group.
You're definitely.
Where we take that day from, I don't know enough about their daily life to know which would be better. I guess, Melissa, you're saying from your perspective as an elementary person that it would be better for them to be there the 14th of August than the 6th of January?
I would say yes, just knowing what they do in August versus January.
Okay.
I mean, it could be any day.
not just at the beginning of the year.
Mhm. Okay, so let me have us take a vote. If you are in favor of adding August 8th as a workday on the 179 calendar and removing January 6th, so that would not be a workday, raise your hand. Opposed, same sign. Okay, so I'll make that adjustment to this one. So day number 1 would be on August 8th, and we'll just adjust the calendar and remove January 6th. Thank you, Dr. Norman, for catching that. That's a good point. Does anybody have any other calendar-related concerns? Employee work calendar. Okay. With the noted change on the 179 that we just talked about, all those in favor of sending these employee calendars onto the meet and confer process, please raise your hand. Opposed, same sign. Okay, we'll move those along then. Next, let's talk about we've done insurance, the forward planning discussion. I just wanted to remind you again, and I know I say this every month, probably at least twice, but our purview is to be advisory, to give recommendations. Obviously, anything that has to do with policy or money or anything, that's a decision that the board ultimately makes. Some of the things that we're going to, excuse me, some of the things that we're going to talk about next would require additional funds. And the board in January voted on a plan for what to do with our anticipated new revenue. Again, that's obviously dependent on the vote, but some of these next discussions will have dollar figures involved, and so we need to take that into consideration too, that the board will make the final decision on whether or not to do these things. I put all of the salary schedules that we haven't talked about in there, and we've had the discussion that we'll need to do 2 sets of salary schedules. One now that basically will go to the board saying, let's change the date from 1819 to 1920, and same numbers. That would be if the levy fails, that would be our reality. If we have a positive result on April 2nd, we will need to have the discussion in April with another set of salary schedules that would include the proposed additions that the board wants to make. Does that make sense to everybody? So this basically is saying on these salary schedules, let's change the date, leave the numbers the same, pass it on. The active retirees are the first one again. I don't see any need for change. The administration one is exactly the same. I do want to go through these one by one because there are a couple of changes on 1 or 2 of them. The next one is the AEL. The AEL program is entirely grant funded. There's no local money that goes into that. So if there are some changes to this, Betty Wymore submits a budget that meets their expenses and doesn't cost the district any of our operating funds. So this is probably pretty darn close, but there could be some changes to this. But again, that would all be grant dollars that would go into that. Education support is good to go. The next 3 pages are the extra duty schedule. It should be good to go. Hilliard short-term instructors, they offer a variety of evening courses, and Dr. Huntsman has told me that she believes these can stay the same and meet their needs. On the next one is the teacher salary schedule for Hilliard. I didn't catch this till today. I would like to suggest that we do the same thing on this one that we did on the other teacher salary schedule, which is remove the repeated numbers in those columns like we did on the other teacher's schedule. Again, just for clarity's sake. I don't know if you guys remember our discussion about that or not. It's the exact same thing, removing the repeated numbers. Does anybody have an issue with doing that?
So we would do that in the bachelor's column and the bachelor's plus 16?
And the grandfathered bachelor as well. Yeah, so there would be those three where the repeated numbers would come off. Anyone opposed to that? Okay. Interpreters is basically what it is. Nurses, same thing. The professional staff we adjusted last year. The social worker column is an exact mirror of the teacher's master column. The SLPAs, homeless and homebound, no change. Teacher salary schedule, this one has already gone to the board, and it shows the repeated numbers dropped off of there. Okay. If you have paper copies, and you take remember we've got the three salary schedules that we're looking at, the PCs, the process consultants, the SLPs, and the OTs, PTs. Looking at normalizing those, condensing the size of the steps. The first 3 pages in your handout were the process consultants, and there's the same format on each set of 3. Okay? Current one is first. The second one is always indexed to 36,200, which is the current teacher base. And then the third one, I had to add some stuff onto. Melissa has an event to go to, and I know somebody else told me, Kelly, if you need to go, just go. I know it's all Lori's fault. She got us off schedule.
The other one, not.
Yeah, not this one. But if you look on the right-hand column of the third page, there's a grandfathered column in there. That's entirely new. We're talking about, from those 3 employee groups, approximately 30 people. I looked at each of the 30 people individually and analyzed their salary to see, with the compression, to propose compression, what would that do to individual employees. There were 4 employees in that group that would be squeezed out of the schedule, basically. With the compression, they were too far toward the bottom, that with the compressions that they would not go backwards with just making the proposed changes. So I created a grandfather column which would allow them to progress, in this instance, at $875 per year, their steps. And that was the same step as the Masters plus 16 column is getting on the larger scale. Does that make sense to people? So the board's philosophy all along has been we don't want anybody moving backwards, and understandably so. But because of the placement of some of the people were close to the bottom, it was necessary to grandfather them into their own schedule, basically. So again, remembering over these 3 salary schedules, the PC, the OTPT, and the SLP, we're talking about 4 people. Right, so it's not a large group, but that's why that grandfather column was.
But you still kept the smaller steps.
Yeah, the increment is 875, just like it is on the
Okay.
on the larger part.
Okay.
Yeah, it didn't. Yes, the answer to your question. Okay, does that grandfather column make sense to everybody? You understand why I put it there?
I'm glad that you did that. That was one of my points to bring up, actually, was what happens when we get to the end there. So you already addressed that.
Okay, yeah.
Good job.
Thanks. It's an anticipatory reaction, I guess. But no, and that's how my understanding is. You know, we've got a grandfather column in the teacher scale because there were a certain amount of employees that would have been adversely affected had that not been created. So that's what I did with these. So we looked at that one. The next one's the OTPT. And again, you'll see the exact same thing on the third sheet. There's a grandfathered doctorate column. And again, a $900 step on the grandfathered part, just like in the larger doctorate column. That affects one person. And that would allow him or her to, again, progress off the scale with the same step that others were getting. And then finally, the SLPs. This schedule already had a grandfather column in there at the bachelor's level. At some point in time, and I don't remember the exact year, it changed to where you had to have a minimum of masters to be an SLP. But we have a person that's on the grandfathered BA column. I also had to add a grandfathered MA column for the exact same reason that we've been talking about.
So it was one for a BA and one for an MA?
Yes, the one that is in black was the grandfathered BA. And I did adjust the step on that to 600 to mirror the step on the teacher's salary schedule for a bachelor's. But that still allows that person to have that $600 raise for the remaining 4 years, assuming that there's no change to the base.
The master's grandfather column, is that for anybody with a master's or just masters in 16?
The only person on that schedule who appeared to be in danger of maxing out or getting frozen was a person on the MA column. So that's the only one that it was created for.
Okay, the step is 850, is that correct?
And I did that because they were far enough down that I had to increase the steps to give them room. Further down.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions on this?
So would you have to redo this again if, say, the person that's grandfathered in his bachelor's decides to stay for longer than those 4 years? Would you add more, or would they then be done at the bottom of that?
That's a good question. And this is just my opinion. I would obviously take advice from whoever. I think on all of our current schedules, once you get to the bottom, you're just at the bottom. So if we were going to make an exception there, I think we would have to do that in other places as well. But again, that's just my opinion.
Because clearly they were towards the bottom already anyway. So it's not like
Yeah,
we're
I
taking
gave
that
them-
away from them also.
Wherever I started, I gave them the same number of steps room that they currently had. So no, nobody's overall schedule was shortened. So yeah, they have the same amount of opportunity to step.
To
and
get to
still
the
have-
bottom of it.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I think that, I know that, in my opinion, this changing these steps down instead of changing all teachers and everybody's steps up to match theirs, that's my ideal way that I would like to see this go, but I think at least this is going to help remedy some of the major concerns that the people in these groups have.
Well, I was having this discussion with these guys earlier. In my mind, the next step that needs to happen, well, let's look at those two really pretty sheets that have all the blue and yellow. The one where the yellow is spread out, that was using the current step to sort them, and the one where the yellow is put together is the proposed step. So we've taken the yellow and pulled it down toward the blue and whatever that other color is, greenish. And I think the next step that I would recommend that needs to happen is I think the step sizes on the teacher scale needs to be pushed up so that you compress this more from the bottom up. And to me then, once that happens, then you have an equitable, across the board type of setting. So that's my 2 cents on, is that basically what you were saying?
Yes.
Yeah, I think by normalizing those that show up in the yellow, we've narrowed the gap between percentage of steps. But by increasing those in the teachers, you push the bottom up and then they'd be even closer together. The other sheet I wanted to give you just to explain to you a little bit, there's one that says comparative costs on there, and it's got a few numbers in red. starting with row 5 and going down to row 31, those are individual employees. And obviously, I left the names off because it's, well, quite frankly, it's none of your business what their salary is. And it shows what they would have had with the current step if we had left the steps the same, how much their increase would have been, the new schedule with the $500 step and what the increase is, and then plus or minus in column G tells you if that person would have gotten more or less in year 1 than before. You'll notice there are some fairly large red numbers in that column, and that, I'll be honest with you, that's the people that got moved to the grandfather. They are still getting steps, and they are still getting an increase. I think the smallest increase on there that I see is 667. There's a 600. And we had the same phenomenon with the professional schedule and the administrative last year. It's just the luck of the draw where you are on that schedule when you compress it and how close you fall to, just as an example, on the SLP one, if you have a master's, the first 2 steps are 44.8 and 45.6. Well, if when you get pulled across, you are at 45.550, it's not very far to get to the first step and then take one more, so you're going to get a smaller. And if yours was 44 instead of 852, 44.9, then it's a long ways to the higher step, and you get another step on top of it. But I mean, if that's the way we did last year, and I just felt like it was the most equitable way to do those. Some people get a little bigger raise, some people get a little less, but there's no way to make it even. So. Any questions on, well, and the other thing I wanted to point out, the savings in year 1, if you look at the very lower right-hand column or corner, in year 1, by compressing these schedules, there'll be a savings of $2,895, and then annual savings after year 1, $8,141 by the compression of the steps. So when you look at a $135 million budget, it's basically a wash. It's a non-factor. Does that make sense to everyone? We've been throwing a lot of numbers at you guys tonight. Okay. I'm going to interpret the silence as no big problems, or else I'm so overwhelmed I don't even know what to say.
When in your personal mental timeline do we reevaluate the steps of all make it, since we're normalizing by decreasing steps of some, when do we then look at increasing steps to make them more competitive to our Kansas City partners?
Well, I think that's an analyzation that you do every year, and you say, do we have the funds to do this? In my personal opinion, hopefully the levy's going to pass, and we'll for a couple of years we'll have the ability to not go backwards and stay afloat. But there's nothing built into that 61 cents that's going to allow us to put $1,500 on the base or something like that. That would require further new revenue. And I mean, that would be a board decision, obviously. When are we willing to, or when do we want to go back to the voters and say, hey, here's what we did with the money you gave us, here are our next needs. And whether that takes the form of a capital improvement bond or a levy, again, those are decisions that would have to. Dr. Manziel, do you want to comment on that particular question?
You did great.
Okay.
That's ultimately what it boils down to, is the revenue that you have. There's not built into this upcoming plan dollars to make adjustments in the salary schedule. Now, the state decides to be gracious and give us buckets of money, then that's stuff we take a look at. The challenge is, they can also decide to take buckets of money back from you, as they're trying to do with a couple of legislative bills that are running through right now with the vouchers and charter schools.
Lori
So-
did also tell me this afternoon that if she won the lottery, she would make a large contribution to the district.
That's only a one-time though, how are you gonna maintain that?
She's happy.
I know, just a wet blanket.
We'll invest it or something.
Yeah, put it in investments.
But yeah, in my mind, Eric, the next thing that needs to happen is to push the bottom up. We've brought the top down, now we need to push the bottom up, but when that will
Based on
happen-
our logistics, it's gonna be at least 5 years, well, 4 to 5 years, depending on when, like you said, when they put something else, a new initiative on the ballot.
When the next step happens.
Yep.
So, and so tell me, this annual savings after 1 year, this is only for these employees that were moved to the grandfathered, is that correct? Or this is
No, that's
all
for-
employees
Yeah,
in the,
none of those employee groups are large.
right,
So that savings is reflective of all of the employees in on those three different salary schedules.
so then, as the advocate for a handful of those employees, if this is such a non-factor, with $8,000 a year is our difference, and I understand we're looking at every penny, as we should, but if this is such a nominal, small percentage of employees, and they are in some very high demand areas that are difficult to fill, why look at
It's about
dropping it down?
equity is the
Yeah,
whole
my answer
purpose
to
of
that
why we
is,
were.
yeah, what Kelly just said, it's an equity issue. The number of employees is in my mind irrelevant. I think the goal of the board is to treat everybody equally and equitably. And if one person over a 10-year span gets a 25% increase and you get, let's say you were unlucky enough to be in the masters plus 16 and you get 11.4%,
Right.
that's not equitable. So it's an equity issue. Will those $8,000 and $135 million, no one will ever even notice that, but it is an equity type of thing.
But $8,000 goes a long way for one small program or
Mhm.
one thing that we need every year.
Yeah, and the reason that we did administrative and professional and some of the other groups before was because they were larger employee groups and the dollar impact was larger. We're just now circling around, hopefully to get it all done now.
And these would be the final groups that we would need to do that to?
I believe so, yeah. All right, any questions on that rigmarole? Okay, now for the million-dollar question. No, it wouldn't be nearly a million. All right, I think the last sheet in your, I don't remember if it was the last one or not, it's the support staff salary schedule I included in there. Over the years, since I've been here and probably before, there have been discussions about, we had a big push for a couple of years to try to get everybody, each employee group to at least the 50th percentile amongst surrounding districts or ones we compare ourselves to. The ones we had not yet achieved that with were the print shop, which is 2 people, 211 secretaries, which I should have looked before at getting an exact number and I didn't, but I'm guessing that to be 25-ish people.
Who are 211?
The 211s would be your elementary secretaries, and Roberta, do you have any 211s at the middle school level? Secretaries? Or are they all 221?
No, they're not the same.
They're not, okay.
Yeah, our summer school bookkeeper secretary is the 221, the other one's 211.
Okay, so I think 25 people is a pretty close, give or take a few people. Lori had mentioned to me the accounting clerks, which that's 2 or 3 people. And our bookkeepers at the high schools, which would be 3 people.
Where are they listed under?
They're under 260 secretaries.
260.
And the suggestion from a couple of years ago had been to move them to a range 4 with the
Yes.
office managers. Okay, so altogether, and then the other factor which you need to know about but we don't deal with is with the operations staff. They have their own collective bargaining agreement, so they're separate from what we deal with. But there are about 160 of them, so that's a bigger dollar issue, obviously. The proposal several years ago had been, over the course of 3 years, there used to be the 260 secretaries. Excuse me. The 260 secretaries were arranged 3, the 221s were arranged 2, and the 211s were arranged 1. And we moved the 221s into range 3 with the 260s, and we moved the 211s up to range 2 where the 221s were, with the idea of, hey, the next year we're going to move the 211s in with everybody else. Then financial Armageddon hit, and we didn't do that. So that's one proposal, is to move the 211 secretaries into range 3, so all secretaries would then be in range 3. There had been discussion, I believe, and Lori, correct me if I don't remember this as clearly, about moving the accounting clerks from 2 to 3, was that correct?
Yes, the accounting clerks, because of all of their duties, moving them up as well, and then with those bookkeepers, they would like be a level below the accounting clerks. So we would probably move the accounting clerks up a little bit more,
Okay.
or, yeah, because the accounting clerks actually are the ones who train all of the bookkeepers. So they would, and all of their duties, they would need to be, I think, above that.
Ms. Angela, are you guys using school cash anymore?
Yes.
Okay, and do the ladies from the business office do some training with you? How do you,
They do. This is how we kind of look at it. The high school level, we've got the entire piece of the pie. We've got Power School, we have e-finance, and then we also have that. So when I call the business office, who are lovely to work with, but they more specialize in what they do. You know, so I might call and have a UMB question, but that person's not there for the day and nobody else can answer that question. You know, so they help us, they train us, you know, in every way that they can, but they're more specialized in their field.
okay.
And those are the account clerks.
Yes.
Mhm. And, also while have we talked about the print shop lead as well?
We haven't moved that one either.
And that
We had
was,
talked about it.
okay. Print shop lead obviously is one person, and moving them from a 3 to 4. So, while I go cough my lungs out, have a little discussion about just if you're in favor of these things, if it makes sense. And again, remembering additional dollars would have to be approved by the board because it's not currently in that proposal for the new revenue. Okay? I'll be back in a minute.
Granted, it is a very small number. Angela, so in your opinion, the accounting clerks and the bookkeepers, would you consider them the same? Or in your opinion, because you're the one who directly works with that,
I know
would they be ahead of, would they be higher or lower, or is it on par?
I would think.
Because you do so much more, or so much different stuff.
Well, okay, I'm going to be totally honest here. When I first took it, they have accounting clerks, we're at a step 1. And it's like, you've got to be kidding me. I felt bad for them. But I think that with their specialization, I think a 3 would be,
So on the same par as bookkeepers.
well, and then we had talked about the 3 bookkeepers going to a 4. A couple of years ago when we met, and that's what we were told that we were doing. And then when we looked at it, it's like, well, that wasn't what happened. They said, well, that was a mistake. So then when the bond issued and passed, you know, we just,
It just fell that way.
it's not, yeah, it's gonna happen. and
So in
we're
your
fine.
opinion, you feel like the bookkeepers should be higher than the account
do.
clerks?
I do, because we
you
do
more.
every part of it. We're doing the deposits, we're doing the revenue and the expenses, we're in all the payments. But I think that them bumping them absolutely up from a 2 to a 3.
Did you hear all that?
Not a bit.
I just asked Angela in her opinion, because she works with the accounting clerks, if they should be on par with the bookkeepers, or if they should be above or below, or where she thinks because of the duties that they're doing and what the bookkeepers in the buildings are doing.
Okay, and I did hear her response to that. Was there anyone who was opposed to recommending the 2 admin secretaries get moved to range 3? Okay. Is there anyone who's opposed to recommending the accounting clerks, and again, I'm not sure, it's either 2 or 3 people, get moved from range 2 to range 3? Okay. Is there anyone who is opposed to recommending that the 3 high school bookkeepers get moved from range 3 to range 4? You guys are easy. Okay, let's go back to print shop. Any problem with moving those 2 people from 1 to 2? And the print shop lead from 3 to 4. All right. And again, I want to stress, I haven't put pen to paper to figure out, but I think we'd probably be looking at in the vicinity for those things would be $50,000 to $60,000 probably. But again, that's an annual expense. It's not a one-time thing. So that would again be a board decision.
So then, is there a purpose to have the range 1 steps? Because nobody would be on that.
I probably would leave it there in case we invent some sort of job that would go on there.
That person leaves and a new person comes in.
Well, she was saying
But the positions
if we
don't-
if we move print shop to range 2, there's nobody else left on range 1. So we'd have a column with nobody in
I
it.
see what you're saying, there's nobody at all.
But is there a preset in case we,
Yeah.
I see that.
I would personally leave it just so it doesn't have to be recreated if we need it. Okay, so anybody opposed to those recommendations? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, as a group of the salary schedules, does anyone have any, here in a moment I'm going to ask you to vote whether or not to move those on to the meet and confer process. So are there any questions about the salary schedules as they were presented with the changes to those 3 where we talked about adding grandfather columns, etc., and to the changes we just discussed on this one? Okay, all those in favor of moving the salary schedules on to the meet and confer process as presented, please raise your hand. Opposed, same sign. Okay. If you meet and conferees can stay for a few minutes, we'll address those 2 items. Otherwise, thank you very much. And again, this is Lori's fault. I'd had us out here a long time ago. All right, thank you very much. And I think we go back to our 3rd Thursday in April, don't we? So it'll be a while till we actually meet. Okay, is this everybody? I guess we still have a quorum. Are you okay with going ahead with? No. Okay. Really 2 simple questions. On the individual employee group calendars, are you guys in favor of moving those on to the board for approval?
Yes.
With the changes that we made tonight?
Yeah, with the changes made tonight, adding August 8th to the 187, was it? No, it's 179. To the 179 and taking away January 6th. And then we had already talked about the changes to the 176.
And these are just the numbers, though. This isn't like when we talked about the wording change, I think
Right.
last time. This isn't that stuff that
No,
we're, right.
no, this is simply telling each individual employee group, here are
These are the days you
the
work.
days
and
that
the
you
days
work.
Gotcha,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, so if you're in favor of moving those on, would you raise your hand? Opposed, same sign. Okay, 4-0. With the salary schedules as presented, and then with what we talked about, moving those employee groups. Let me read through those again just to make sure that I have them correctly. Moving print shop from range 1 to range 2, to 11 secretaries from range 2 to range 3, accounting clerks from range 2 to range 3, bookkeepers from range 3 to range 4, and print shop lead from range 3 to range 4. And then everything else staying the same on the others. Everybody okay with that? Moving on to
This
the board.
is, and this is all this is including all the equalizing or the lowering of the
Yes.
steps and
Yes,
everything.
and putting the grandfathered, additional grandfathered columns in there.
I still have my reservations about the lowering of the step, and I understand that the comment has been made that it's about equity. There's a lot of things that aren't equitable, and I understand that point. I wish that the equity was being driven in the other direction. And I understand that we also have a financial hardship that we're trying to deal with, so I can appreciate the situation, even though it's not an ideal situation. With the addition, in my opinion, still not in complete support of lowering the steps, but I will go ahead and support what we're doing with the understanding that we have good faith that we will be looking at this starting next year, whether or not that's something that can happen, but we will start looking at this every year about increasing the steps for all to make that equitable and competitive with districts that we are losing so many individuals to.
Yeah, no, I think that's the next logical step. Okay, anybody else have comments before I ask you to vote? All right, if you're in favor of moving the salary schedules on as presented, would you raise your hand, please? Opposed, same sign. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Hopefully you closed your mouth at the right time. So and
If this persists, you're gonna have to warn us to bring surgical masks.
well, if I'm still doing this in 7 weeks, I'm going to, well, it'll be 6 weeks till we actually meet. Thank
Staying
you.
home tomorrow, Brian?
What's that?
Are you gonna stay home tomorrow?
No, I can't afford
She
that.
can't tomorrow either?
My wife doesn't want me home. She encourages me to go to work every day.
No matter what.
Did she move up here?
Yeah, we actually live together again.
Oh, that's nice. And I'm sure that was weird.
You know, it was weird, but actually I think our marriage is stronger because we do it for a while.
That's okay.
Well, my marriage, well, but, you know, and realistically, the first 12 to 14 months I was here from like 6:30 in the morning till 7:30 in the afternoon.
So you wouldn't have been home.
I wouldn't have seen her anyway.
Where was she at? I'm sorry for, I don't.
In Baldwin City, Kansas. She was finishing a job at Baker University.
Oh, okay.
And
Thank you.
thanks, Dr. Benzal. Dr. Blevins, thank you.
Get inside there.
What'd you find?
That really, little things truly do amuse me.
Yeah, but you ought to look in there, there might be something special.
I just felt, and there was nothing.
I always like pulling out my old coats for that reason, like, ooh, there's money in that pocket. I used to always find money in my pocket, and I think now I've run that luck out.
I only find mints.
Well,
Mints in
that's
every
not bad.
coat.
Can't have too many mints, or cough drops, or whatever.
Good Lord, it's not a half my leg.
Did John sleep? Okay, well,
You did.
okay. Good night, John.
I thought, well, maybe Bridget went and turned it off. Maybe you had her do that, I don't know.
Yeah, she might have.
I mean, she knows her way around the camera.
She should.